Every night, while a city sleeps, a small army clocks in to watch it, the guards. Empty malls, dark museums, construction sites lit by one trailer bulb, places that spend their days full of people and their nights full of something else. A guard's whole job is to notice what doesn't belong. These 3 stories are about the nights the guards noticed and what noticed back. The Westfield Park Mall ran 41 security cameras, and I could draw you the coverage map from memory even now. Every entrance, every anchor store, every service corridor. Third shift, 10 to 6, me and a wall of monitors in a windowless room behind the food court. And this story is about the one screen on that wall that should never have been there. Camera 12, bottom row, third from the left. It showed a service corridor, beige block walls, grey door at the far end, a flickering fluorescent tube 2/3 down that strobed about once a minute. Standard mall anatomy, except for one detail I discovered my second week when a water leak had me walking every service corridor in the building with a maintenance map. That corridor didn't exist. I matched every hallway on our map to a camera. 40 cameras, 40 locations. Camera 12's corridor, that specific wall, that grey door, that dying light, was nowhere in Westfield Park Mall. I walked the building twice. I measured the map against the footprint. There was no place left for it to be. You'd think that discovery would feel like a horror movie. Mostly, it felt like a filing error. I reported it. Day management shrugged. Old feed, probably a dead camera showing a loop. Except it wasn't a loop. Loops repeat. You check the way you check a thing at 3 a.m. when the mall is a black lake and your coffee's gone cold. I watched camera 12 for whole shifts, and the flicker never repeated its rhythm. Sometimes a moth battered the lens light. Once a paper cup rolled through frame, pushed my air from a door I never saw open. This was a live camera watching a real corridor in real time, just not anywhere I could find. I got used to it because you get used to everything on nights. Camera 12 became my aquarium, a little window of elsewhere, humming along, moth and flicker and stillness. And then, on a Tuesday in February at 2:47 a.m., a man walked through my non-existent corridor carrying a pry bar. I want you to feel the specific wrongness of that moment. Not fear of the man, confusion about the universe. If he was real, where was he? I did the only thing my hindbrain offered. I keyed the radio and reported him to nobody about nowhere while watching him work the grey door at the corridor's end with the calm of a man who'd done it before. And my partner that night, an old-timer named Gus who'd guarded half the county in his day, leaned into the monitor, went very still, and said the sentence that broke the case open. "That's not our mall, that's the Ridgemont." The Ridgemont Galleria, 2 towns over, built in 1981 by the same developer from the same blueprints as Westfield Park. Sister malls, twins, identical down to the block walls and the light fixtures. Camera 12 we pieced together later with an installer who got very quiet on the phone was part of a wireless retrofit both malls got in the late 90s. Same contractor, same frequencies, and somewhere along the way one of Ridgemont's corridor feeds had bled into our wall, slotted into our matrix, and lived there for years. Nobody caught it because the corridor looked like ours. Every corridor looked like ours. It was ours, 80 years of architecture ago in some draftsman's pen. Which meant the man with the pry bar was robbing the Ridgemont Galleria live in front of the wrong mall's guard. Gus called Ridgemont's security office while I called County Dispatch, and I narrated a burglary happening 26 miles away as if I were standing in it. He's through the door. He's in the east stockroom run. Grey door means Zale's back corridor if it's the same map. Check the same map. It's the same mall. And a Ridgemont guard who'd been doing his rounds with no idea, and 2 sheriff's cruisers converged on a man exiting a jeweler's service store with a bag of display trays. He never understood how he was caught. The Ridgemont's own cameras had a blind spot in that corridor. Theirs was the dead feed, ours was the live one. The failure was symmetrical. And I've thought about that symmetry ever since. Buildings born from the same blueprint, looking out for each other. That's the most rational story I've got, and I've had years to come up with a better one. I clocked out of my last shift and patted camera 12 on the way out the door. It had earned it. Alarm response is security work with the boredom filed off. You sit in a patrol truck. Somewhere in your patch of the county, a sensor trips. You drive out, you check the doors, you call the key holder, the person on the contract who can open the building, and 99 times in 100 it's wind, a bird in a warehouse, a balloon drifting past a motion sensor. This story is about number 100, and I'll warn you now, there's nothing supernatural in it. What was waiting for me out there was worse, because it had a name I knew. The Meridian Business Park was on my route, 11 units, tilt-up concrete, machine shops and a print house, and in Unit 9, a medical supply distributor that held product worth stealing. Unit 9's alarm started tripping in October, Tuesdays mostly, between 2 and 3, interior motion, Zone 4, back storeroom. And by the time I'd roll up, doors sealed, glass intact, nothing on the exterior cameras but my own headlights. I'd call the key holder, a tired manager named Deb. She'd drive out in her robe, we'd walk it together, and Zone 4 would be sitting there in the dark, full of sealed boxes, still as a chapel. False alarm, sign here, good night. 4 times that October, and on the 4th walkthrough, standing in Zone 4 at 3 a.m., Deb said the thing that stuck a pin in my brain. She said, "The count's off again. Not missing boxes, nothing so loud as that. The count. Inventory drifting light, a few units at a time for weeks, the kind of shrinkage a distributor writes off as picking errors, and always, she said, from this room, the room the alarm loved, the room that was always empty and always sealed when we arrived. Here's what you need to understand about alarms. They don't just trip, they log. Every zone, every second, arm and disarm, whose code, which door. So I did something slightly outside my job description. My company installed that system, and my supervisor, Ray, had trained me on the panel himself, and I pulled Unit 9's event history, and sat in my truck reading it with the dome light on, feeling the temperature of the night change. The alarm trips at 2-something Tuesday were real, but 40 minutes before each one, the log showed the system disarmed and rearmed cleanly with a valid code at the back door. Someone with a code was letting themselves in, taking 40 quiet minutes among the sealed boxes and leaving, and the false alarm that summoned me was their one mistake, a zone they kept forgetting, rearmed faster than they exited. The code they used wasn't Deb's. It wasn't any employees. It was an installer code, the master our company techs use on service calls, the code that exists in exactly one binder in one office under the desk of the man who trained me on the panel. Ray. I want to be careful here because this is a story about a real person who went to prison, and because the next 10 days were the loneliest of my career. I didn't confront him. I didn't tell anyone at the company. I didn't know how far it went, and a man who'll steal medical supplies through a system he installed will absolutely delete a log he knows you've read. So I photographed the panel history on my phone in my truck, hands shaking, and I drove to the sheriff's department on my day off in my own clothes, and I found out I wasn't the first. Deb's company had already filed a shrinkage report. An investigator had already noticed that the losses ran Tuesdays. What they hadn't had, what nobody outside my company could have gotten, was the installer code in the logs and the name of the man who held the binder. They let the next Tuesday happen. I know now, because it was in the case file, that I was on shift that night, 3 miles away, parked at a gas station with a cold coffee, deliberately not dispatched, my own route quietly rerouted by a sheriff's request my dispatcher never explained to me. Ray came in through the back door of Unit 9 at 2:11 a.m. with a valid code and a hand truck. The deputies waiting inside Zone 4, among the sealed boxes he'd been shopping from since summer, reported that when the lights came on, the first thing he said, the very first thing, was my name. Not a question, not a curse, just my name flat, like a man checking off the answer to a puzzle. He'd trained me on that panel, and some part of him had apparently spent October waiting to find out if the training took. It took Ray. He'd been doing it across 3 business parks, 4 years, always through systems he installed, always in the gap between what alarms detect and what people bother to read. The company survived the scandal barely. I got a commendation I never framed, and a lesson I'll hand to anyone who wears the uniform. The alarm is not the security system. The log is the security system. The alarm only tells you something moved. The log tells you who had a key. For 9 years, I worked nights at a small regional history museum, the kind of place with 2 floors, 1 guard, and a collection nobody famous ever bothered to steal. This is the story of the artifact in Case 7, and I want to say at the outset, I know how it sounds. Every guard who worked that building before me knew how it sounds. That's why none of us ever put it in a report, and why I'm only telling it now, years out, on a channel where nobody knows my name. Case 7 sat in the war wing, between the uniforms and the letters home, a brass pocket watch, dented across the back, belonging to a local boy, first private class, 19 years old, who didn't come home from the First World War. Donated by his mother in 1934. The placard says the watch was returned with his effects, still running. It isn't running now, it's 100-some years old. The hands stand at 11:11. Here's what the placard doesn't say, and what I learned my first November on the job from the guard I was replacing, a stooped, methodical man named Elias, who walked me through the building one time and spent, I noticed, longer at Case 7 than everywhere else combined. He tapped the glass, gently, like knocking on a neighbor's door, and said, "She gets wound the first of the month, director's own hand since before my time, and she always stops the same place. Watch." I thought he meant watch, the noun. He meant watch, the verb. Because that's the thing, the whole impossible center of this story. The watch runs. Wound monthly, it runs beautifully. Horologists have serviced it twice in my 9 years. Clean movement, honest wear, nothing remarkable. It ticks around its little dial for days like any brass watch made in 1915. And then, sometime in the first week, no schedule, no pattern anyone's ever caught, and believe me, we've tried, it stops. And it is always, always at 11:11. Not near it, at it. I have personally, on 14 separate nights across 9 years, walked past Case 7 at start of shift with the watch ticking and the hands at some ordinary hour, and returned on my 4 a.m. round to find them squared at 11:11, still like folded hands. I've stood there with my flashlight and my breath fogging the case. The war wing runs cold. Old building, everyone says. The war wing runs cold. Doing the guard math. No vibration, no visitor, no cleaner on shift. Sensors quiet. Glass sealed. Nothing stopped that watch except whatever stops it every month in the dark on its own hour. You already know the hour. Everyone who hears this story gets there at their own speed, and I watched trainees get there for years. The 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Armistice. The minute the guns stopped in 1918, 1 year too late for the boy in Case 7 who died in the spring of 1918, at 19, with this watch in his pocket. His mother outlived him for 40 years. The donation ledger, which I have held, records what she said when she handed it over in 1934, transcribed by some curator with the good sense to write it down. It keeps stopping on the 11. I haven't the heart to keep correcting it. It keeps stopping on the 11 in 1934. So no, we never reported it, none of us. 9 decades of night guards passing Case 7 down like the logbooks in a fire tower, because what would the report say? Artifact functioning abnormally? The watch isn't malfunctioning, the watch is observing something. A minute of silence that lasts all month. A boy's brass heart wound faithfully by strangers, running its little laps and then returning every time to the only minute that ever mattered, the minute the noise stopped, the minute peace came, the minute he missed by 7 months. I'll tell you my last night, and then I'm done. I retired in November, my choice, symmetry is free, and my final round fell on the 11th. I got to Case 7 a few minutes early, and the watch was ticking. I could hear it in the empty wing, the way you can hear a tap drip 3 rooms away. I stood there, an old man with a flashlight in a museum of other people's grief, and I watched the second hand walk up the dial toward the top of the hour, 11:09, 11:10, and I want to be exact about what happened because it's the only paranormal claim I will ever make, and I will make it under oath. At 11:11, the watch stopped. In front of me, mid-tick. and the war wing, which always runs cold, went colder. 1 degree of presence, one held breath of a room for about 60 seconds, and then the radiator clanked, and the wing was just a wing, and the watch stood at 11:11, where it stands right now, tonight in Case 7, in a small museum I won't name, waiting for the first of the month and the director's hand. They offered to let me wind it once, my last morning. I said no. Some clocks aren't keeping our time. The kindest thing a watchman can do, and I was one 9 years, so I'm allowed to say it, is let them keep their own. If you've made it this far, tonight, somewhere near you, a guard is walking an empty building with a flashlight past all the things that go still when the lights go out. Most of what they watch never watches back. Most. Subscribe to the Hollow Dial, because time doesn't heal, it haunts. And if you've ever worn the badge on nights, we want your story. Leave it in the comments. We're listening, and so is something else.